If you were playing FGO during its most recent event, you may have come across this farming quest and thought to yourself, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? If that was you, no worries, you were not alone. In this video, we're going to discuss what this is, what it means for the future, and a little bit about how to prepare for this type of quest going forward. So what this is the new 90++ farming difficulty that represents the new highest difficulty of farming quest that is available in the game and will be in all events going forward. There are a couple of obvious reasons why these are pretty difficult with traditional farming teams, and you can see them right here. The odd enemy layouts, as well as the very high enemy HP thresholds that you have to meet to defeat each wave. Because of these strange layouts, running Buster or arts looping or quick looping teams becomes quite difficult because you don't have the high number of enemies to hit with your Noble Phantasm to get good refunds. And Buster teams also run into a challenge where those teams ramp up quite significantly the further into the fight it goes, right? They do fairly low damage on turn 1, a little bit more damage on turn 2, then really high damage on turn 3. With these quests, you're going to have to deal really high damage even from turns 1 and 2. So even traditional, like Buster reloading teams, really struggle with these quests or have to be rebalanced around how to work with quests of this type. And a big part of what makes them difficult is that no two of them are really quite the same. This one, as you can see here, is 3 waves with 1 enemy each. If you're watching this on release, the next one that the North American server will have access to is actually only 2 waves. I believe it's 1 enemy on the first wave and then 2 enemies on the second wave. So even that is a little bit of a different challenge or a different puzzle compared to this one that you're seeing right now. So the solution to being able to farm these is all highly roster dependent, and your capability to do so can vary from one iteration to another. If you can do this one, that's no guarantee that you'll necessarily be able to do the next one. If you are unable to do this one, well, you might have the necessary roster pieces to be able to farm the next one quite efficiently. These quests are intended for long-time players or higher level players who have quite strong accounts and who are interested in spicing up their farming a little bit. The reason that you might want to run this quest if you are able to is because it is the most efficient way to farm. These 90++ difficulty quests will reward the highest drop rate for event currencies, higher drop rates for ascension and skill up materials, the most bond points returned, as well as the highest drop rate for event craft essences. During lottery events especially, where you want as many of those as you can get, this is the best place to be getting them. So I recommend always at least looking them up or running them a couple times with different teams, just seeing if you're able to. If not, that's totally okay. If you're not ready for this or you don't have the pieces on your account necessary to be able to farm any given iteration, you can go back to the 90+ difficulty and you should be able to clear almost the whole event shop just with natural AP running that quest over and over, depending on how efficient you are with using your AP every day. So that one is not any less efficient. This is just another layer or another level of efficiency for those who are interested in doing so. I think this is fun. If you don't think this kind of thing is fun and like tweaking your team and trying to set up for these very specific challenges, if you're not into that, that's, again, totally fine. You can stay on the 90+ difficulty level and you'll be just fine. You'll be able to clear the event shop more often than not. Because these are going to change so much from one event to the next, it's hard to give specific advice as far as servants that are useful across many iterations of this quest or anything like that. So it's a good idea, if you haven't done so in a while, to set up your filter settings kind of like this and select one enemy and just go through and kind of familiarize yourself with your single target servants. Obviously, they haven't been particularly useful for farming quests until right now. All of a sudden, they are very useful for farming quests because the enemy HP thresholds are so high that AoE servants usually cannot reach them. And specifically what you're looking for is any single target servant who has some kind of special trait damage bonus, because those are huge as far as their ability to increase damage against specific enemies of that type. To have pulled up Enkidu's servant page, he was the third wave on that quest that I was showing at the beginning of the video. We can look at his traits: heaven or earth, humanoid servant, weak to enemy leash, feminine appearance. And we can see if we can find a servant on our roster who is strong against one or multiple of these traits. Servants like Tamamo Lancer here, who have special damage against males. Obviously, males covers a huge selection of enemies, so this is really wide trait coverage. I'm not going to have to work very hard to find an enemy male archer who Tamamo Lancer will get not only class advantage against, but also special trait bonus damage against. So I can buff her with an event bonus craft essence. I can buff her with a really strong buster support like an Oberon or a Koyan, and she will absolutely deal tons and tons of damage in a situation like that. And it's worth noting that depending on kind of how you're set up, your NP5 3 and 4-star servants might be stronger than your NP1 5-star servants. So it's a really good idea to take a couple of your servants and plug them into like a Noble Phantasm damage calculator, one of which I'm going to link to in the description below, and run them under the same conditions and find out, hey, who actually has sort of the best performance given the differences in NP levels. For example, if you got Summer Hokusai and you have her at NP5, she's going to outperform a lot of NP1 5-stars. So the higher rarity should not automatically be taken as a sign that they're going to be the best choice for these types of quests right now. Once you've got your servant, your single target servant who you kind of want to lean on for these types of high difficulty quests, it's a really good idea to come over to the append skill menu and get their middle append skill up to level 10 as quick as you can. If you were playing for a little while now, you should have received a ton of crystallized lore from the change that was made to the way those are distributed recently. This is a great opportunity to use like one per class almost and get a bunch of middle append skills up to level 10, because once this is at level 10, the servant goes into battle with 20% Noble Phantasm charge. That's before any craft essence or any external application. And what that does is it really opens up what kind of supports can be brought with the servant, what kinds of craft essences they can be run with, what kind of kit they have access to in terms of their own skills, and make them viable for this type of content. So Lancelot here, since his middle append skill is at 10, he starts out the battle with 20% Noble Phantasm charge. I can run him with an event damage bonus craft essence, which often, but not always, will give the servant 50% starting charge once they are max limit broken. And then that puts him at 70% before I've touched a single button. And then his own skill can charge him the rest of the way up to 100, and then I can not even have to worry about feeding him Noble Phantasm charge if I'm only going to use his Noble Phantasm once on the third wave, for instance. I can just stack the rest of the team with buffers who can buff his Noble Phantasm damage or his arts damage or what have you to get and really wring as much damage as possible out of his Noble Phantasm. I don't have to worry about, am I going to be able to charge him up? By comparison, if I didn't have this at level 10 and I had to run him with something like a kaleidoscope or something else that is not going to buff damage anywhere near as much as hopefully the event damage bonus craft essence rather, that really limits how I have to build the rest of the team around him, because all of a sudden he's not dealing that much damage because he's getting no help from the craft essence, so I have to rely on everybody else to not only help him get his Noble Phantasm potentially, but also to pick up even more slack in terms of the damage that I'm trying to deal with him. And then the other thing to note is that there's a pretty good chance in some of these teams that you're going to build for this sort of content that you might run what's called a multi-core team, which in other words means you're using 2 damage-dealing servants. You're probably only going to have 1 limit broken event damage bonus craft essence, though. So on the other servant, Black Grail is a really good one to have at a high level, because the damage bonus that it gives is incredible and will come in super handy for stabilizing their damage and trying to make sure that they can hit those same really high damage thresholds that they need to in order to clear the wave or waves that you've assigned to them. Just to briefly clarify a bit of lingo that I just used there, single core and multi-core are terms that you're going to run into a lot if you look into farming these 90++ quests. This is not a term that's as weird as it sounds at first. The core just refers to the servant who is kind of, the team is being built around them, right? The team is being built around supporting, recharging, buffing that servant. So in this case, this is a very typical Buster reloading team. Morgan uses her NP on her own with her own skills and her craft essence on the first turn. On the second turn, the Koyans recharge her. She uses her NP again. On the third wave, we swap in Oberon with the plug suit, and he recharges her for the third Noble Phantasm on the third wave. This is a single core team, or what you would refer to as a single core team. By comparison, something like this is what you would call a double core or multi-core team. We would have Artoria use her AoE Noble Phantasm to clear the first wave, and then Castoria would recharge her, and then on the third wave we would swap in Lancelot for his high single target Noble Phantasm damage to clear a potential third wave or Enkidu with 1 million HP or whatever. This multi-core setup is probably the easier one most of the time. If you are trying to get by with a single core setup on these 90++ quests, that often requires like NP3 SSRs or above, or highly specific support units that you may or may not have access to. These multi-core teams are a little bit lower bar to clear as far as, you usually only need 1 Castoria or 1 Koyanskaya or what have you. And the main thing to note here is that you're going to have your 2 cores are going to serve different purposes with their Noble Phantasm, whether that's one of them is AoE and one of them is single target, as is in this example, or if it's going to be one of them has trait bonus against something on wave 2 and the other one has trait bonus against something on wave 3. So you can use these multi-core teams to set a little bit of a lower bar for yourself as far as the type of team that you can make to hopefully try to clear these 90++ difficulty quests. That's really all I have for you today. However, I do have a ton of resources for you in the description down below. As I mentioned, I have that damage calculator that I'd like you all to go and play around with a little bit. I also am going to link to a couple of other videos that go into some topics that I think is important for your general knowledge as far as team building for high-level content. One of them is going to relate to buff stacking and how different types of buffs work together and why it's important to use buffs of many different types. The other one is going to be a video with somebody who went and farmed the most recent 90++ difficulty quest with a bunch of different teams to show off how many different ways it could actually be done depending on what you do or don't have access to. He used different servants, he used different NP level servants, 4 stars, 5 stars, append skills, non-append skills, meta supports, non-meta supports, etc. Just to show that really whatever you have, you can probably figure out some kind of way to make something like this work roughly. So please do go check out those resources that I have pinned in the description, not pinned, just posted in the description really. And then let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer anything to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.